Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour. Well, May is Lupus Awareness Month, and Rupinder Sandhu, who is the sister of someone who's been on my show before, reached out to me because she's a volunteer with Lupus Ontario in the area of support and education. And Rupinder has got an interesting journey, a lupus journey. It began in 1996 when she was first diagnosed with lupus after suffering unusual symptoms such as extreme fatigue and swollen joints. With the support of family and friends and exemplary care from the Lupus Clinic at Toronto Western Hospital, she's enjoyed years of stable health. Rupinder has persevered through the ups and downs of a chronic illness and enjoys a 24-year career as a teacher, then a vice principal, and now a principal in elementary schools. Rupinder Sandhu wants to tell us about lupus and her journey. Rupinder, thank you for joining us. How are you?
I'm well. Thank you for having me on the show, Brian.
It's a pleasure because I want to hear more about your journey and about lupus. Tell us, maybe just off the top, if we could, what is lupus?
Lupus is a chronic disease, and it can present in many different ways with a variety of symptoms caused by inflammation in many parts of the body. So it belongs to a group of diseases that are autoimmune, much like multiple sclerosis or rheumatoid arthritis. And the most common type of lupus is SLE, which is systemic lupus erythematosus, which is the type of lupus that I have. It's pretty complex, and it can target any tissue or organ in the body, from your skin, your heart, kidneys, joints, your blood. It's the most complex type of lupus, but there is another type of lupus. Some patients only experience symptoms on their skin, which is discoid lupus. And then very few people have one that is drug induced, and often it subsides after they stop particular drugs.
And is lupus genetic, or how does one?
There are some hereditary links. There have been studies that show that there are people in the same family who have lupus, but there's still work to be done there. And anybody can get it, men, women, children. It's most common in women of childbearing years, when they're about 8 times more likely, between ages 15 and 45, 8 times more likely than men to get it.
And you said you first noticed it when you had chronic fatigue and pain in your joints. Tell me what exactly happened, if you could.
Sure. I was in Teachers College at the time doing my Bachelor of Education in Ottawa, and I had a lot of late nights, was very busy. It was very cold there. And I started to notice swelling in my joints. And at the time, I was feeling a lot of fatigue as well, but I just thought the fatigue was due to my busy schedule. Yep. But once I started noticing the swelling in my joints, then I went to the doctor. She referred me to a specialist in the hospital in Ottawa, and I was diagnosed pretty quickly.
Oh, really? And the swelling, is this small swelling, big swelling, big, huge bulge, or like, give me a sense of the swelling?
Yeah, almost like if, like just as if there's fluid, basically, like fluid filling up your hands.
Right.
So, my fingers looked like sausages, and closing my hands and opening, closing, I couldn't close them past a certain amount because of all the swelling.
Well, that's interesting. So I've got some of that. I've got crooked fingers, and I got swelling in my joints and pinching in my palm. And I'm told that I have arthritis in my fingers and something called Viking's disease in my palm.
Oh, okay. Well, I've never heard of that. I've never heard of Viking's disease. No. So lupus does have that arthritic component where your joints are hurting. But the difference between arthritis and lupus with the joint issues is once the lupus is under control, the joints are fine again, right? Whereas with arthritis, you don't get that period of being, without it anymore.
And how do you get it under control, or is that a long process?
Usually, you can have proper health care, like health practices, but most lupus patients have to use some kind of medical therapy. So there's several different drugs that do help to control lupus. So there's been quite a lot of progress in that area. So it's much better than it used to be, say, in the 60s or 70s, for sure.
We're chatting tonight with Rupinder Sandhu, who is a volunteer with Lupus Ontario. She's also, interesting enough, a teacher, vice principal, and our principal in elementary schools in Ontario. So she knows about awareness and education. May is Lupus Awareness Month. And we're going to take a break and come back more with Rupinder, where she can tell us a little bit more about lupus and what she has done to build awareness. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour, Saga 960. May is Lupus Awareness Month, and we've got a guest tonight who suffered for 24 years with lupus, Rupinder Sandhu. She's a volunteer with Lupus Ontario. She's a teacher, vice principal, and now principal of elementary school in Meadowvale in Mississauga. And she's got, I think a inspirational story that not only has she been resilient in the face of her journey with lupus, but now she's a volunteer and she wants to educate people about lupus. So, let's talk a little bit about your own personal journey, Rupinder, for a minute. So you say that you were diagnosed when you were a student, doing your bachelor's of teaching fairly quickly. So that's good. Tell me, how quickly they were able to give you medication and what the process was, if you could.
Sure. So I was diagnosed quickly, but that's uncommon for lupus patients. So I just want to put that out there. Many patients can go, the average is about 6 years to get a diagnosis. For me, I had a particular antibody that showed up, which is found in lupus patients. So they were able to diagnose me quite quickly.
The average diagnosis takes 6 years. Is that what you said?
Yes, because lupus presents in so many different ways that often doctors aren't sure what it is, at the beginning. And then there's also, the knowledge of lupus is growing, but it has been an illness that isn't widely known. So those are some of the reasons why it takes so long to diagnose. They call it the disease with 1,000 faces.
Really?
So how it presents in me could be different than how it presents in one of my colleagues at Lupus Ontario. So it's hard to diagnose. It's getting better now that more and more physicians are more educated around lupus, but it's taken some time to get there, and there's a lot more to do still.
Now, why do we not know more about lupus? Is it a disease or an illness that's only been discovered of late?
I think it's been known for a while, but not widely known. So the research from, say, the 60s to now has been quite amazing. Like the lupus clinics in Ontario are on the leading edge of research, and they've made great gains and have learned a lot about the disease in those years. So it just wasn't a widely known disease in the past. I'm sure it still existed, but it wasn't diagnosed as such. And the life expectancy of people has grown so much since that time. And so
after you, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. So after I was diagnosed, I lived with lupus with the pain and the fatigue for many years. I was on medication that just helped with the inflammation for a long time, but didn't treat it fully. And then when I was in about 99, 2000, I was in England, and I wasn't managing the lupus very well there because I had a new doctor, and like when you don't know the doctor, you're not sure if you're not as comfortable. So he did make a recommendation for me to go on a stronger medication, but I was afraid to do it. So my lupus got out of control there, and I was teaching in England at the time, and I had a major flare. a major flare where my kidneys were involved. So the lupus was attacking my kidneys. I had a lot of complications. I had to have a biopsy while I was living there. And then at the end of that,
let me interrupt for a second. Why a biopsy?
To see how my kidneys were doing and what the level of damage was at the time. So they have to check.
The flare-up was caused by what? By just it flared up, or because you had gone off the medication, or because of extra stress, or do you know?
I think my lupus at the time was starting to become more active at the same time that I had gone overseas. And so had I been here and with my trusted physician, I may have followed their advice. You know, looking back, I probably would have followed their advice more closely, but the doctor in England told me I needed to go on this particular medication, prednisone, and I was worried and scared about going on it. So I said I didn't want to, and he was, you know, pretty adamant that I needed to. And so, you know, in that time of going back and forth, the disease progressed. And so you have to really control it, right? And
Yep.
And once it gets to that level, you do have to control. Well, I feel for me and many other people, you do have to control it with medication.
Are there any other lifestyle changes that you made to help control it, or just the medication?
I think the medication was the main thing, but of course, you know, I try to make sure that I get adequate rest. That's really big for me. If I'm not well rested, I start to feel little, you know, twinges of activity. And I try to eat, you know, be as healthy as possible, eat healthy, have a healthy diet, and get, you know, moderate exercise. So those kinds of things do help. But for me, ever since once I got back to Canada, and I eventually, after a couple of doctors, got recommended to see the doctors at the lupus clinic at Toronto Western Hospital. Once I got to be in their care, and I gave in to the fact that I am going to need medication as a part of my management of lupus. I've been doing much, much better, and my lupus is in control, and I'm living, you know, a very normal life. But I had to get to that point where I was, you know, I've decided that I'm going to follow, you know, strictly the recommendations of my doctors, and they've been wonderful.
The medication you're taking now is what?
I take Plaquenil, which is the hydroxychloroquine that's been in the news lately. I don't know if you remember that.
Trump thought it was a cure for stuff.
Yes. So I take that, and I take azathioprine, which is also called Imuran. Those two medications help me control the lupus. With the Plaquenil, that whole time where it was in the news and people were trying to get it, it really impacted people with lupus. So there are people that I have seen through our support meetings, through Lupus Ontario, where they had trouble getting it, and some still are having trouble getting it. So, you know, that whole media frenzy really did impact the lupus community.
Really, that's interesting. And just to remind everybody, so he was taking it, or at least he was recommending it for COVID-19. And it was what? Because it reduced the inflammation in the lungs, and at least he thought, and in the studies, it didn't?
That's what people were saying that, and believing that it was going to be a miracle cure for COVID. But through the studies that have been published, there's no real link. People who got lupus, people with lupus who are on it, didn't have a better outcome from, I think that's what I read, just because they were taking it.
Really, that's fascinating. And so is this a daily prescription drug regimen that you're on?
Yes. Yeah. I take it daily, and it has helped me control my lupus. And, you know, the care I get at Toronto Western is very, they're very attentive. My blood work is done every 3 months, and any blips I get called, and we do repeat to make sure nothing's happening.
And are the drugs something you take at home, or do you have to go in the hospital to take?
No, these are drugs you can take at home.
And so therefore, I presume that Peel Board of Education covers that in your drug plan?
Yeah, most benefit plans cover these drugs. They're pretty typical drugs. There's nothing outstanding, they're not something.
But one of the things one of the things that's been in the news that you're undoubtedly aware of is, some people's proposals for national pharmaceutical care, drug care plans. And while people that are employed full time by good companies, good organizations like yourselves have drug plans that cover important pharmaceutical products like yourself are benefited, but poor people that are on contracts, people that work for their own, independent business people, whatever, professionals, would have to cover that cost of a life-saving drug themselves. And so national pharmacare, I think, is an issue. We're not going to talk about it today, but how critically important it is for you. And, you're lucky that you have an employer that covers such a.
Oh yeah, definitely, for sure. When I first got back from England, I was not working, and I could not work. And that was a big stressor, is, the medication that me and my family were paying for each month. And at the time I was taking something that was just released and was quite an expensive drug. So yeah, there's a lot of people out there who really struggle with the drugs they need to stay healthy, which is a major concern.
So why have you volunteered for Lupus Ontario?
Well, I used to see the flyers when I would go to the lupus clinic about Lupus Ontario, and I went on their website many times and looked things up and participated in a few things. But I always had in my mind I'd like to volunteer. And just this last summer was the first time I did, and I helped organize the Lupus Walk in Mississauga. And after the walk, I got more involved with Lupus Ontario, and some of the volunteers there reached out to me to see if I wanted to get involved in one of the committees. So since then, I've been involved with the Education and Support Committee. So what we do at Lupus Ontario is hold webinars and support meetings. And while COVID's been on, the webinars have been the education has largely been, electronic. So the webinars have been great. We've had a variety of different professionals giving education and information on various topics. So that's been wonderful. And getting involved has been great. I just wanted to, I feel like I'm in a point in my life where I have, my disease is stable. I have some time. I'd like to give back and support how I can with the lupus community. And because, Lupus Ontario is a really important organization, but we don't have government funding. So most people who work for Lupus Ontario are volunteering. So I thought, I'm in a position to help, and I think I should. So I've gotten involved, and I'm hoping to continue to be involved.
Excellent. Tell us about the walk and where it is and when it is, and if people want to participate, what they do. Yeah,
sure. So the walk it used to be like an actual walk where we had huge groups and we'd walk in different cities around Ontario. But last year, it was the first year that we did a virtual walk. So it was still held in all the different towns and cities where we have volunteers. However, everybody who was participating could do their own walk or do their own activity. You can even do yoga. We have many members who have mobility issues. So, we've opened it up to doing whatever activity that you want to do to highlight the day. And then we had pictures and videos that came in that our social media folks would post on our social media. So that's how we came together as a community. I'm organizing the Mississauga Walk because I'm from Mississauga, and right now it's a virtual walk, but if things lift, it's on August 21st, and anyone who wants to get involved can go to www.walkforlupusontario.org, and you can sign up there. There's a way to find the walk in your city, and you can join a team or just walk with your own family or friend, or you can simply donate if that's what you wish to do. And there's also an option for corporate sponsorship. So if there's any companies out there that would like to sponsor the Lupus Walk, you can find all of the information on the Walk for Lupus Ontario website.
And this is August the what?
August 21st.
August 21st, the Walk for Lupus.
Yes, and anyone can join. And if you want to join my team, it's up there on the website, and you can find it. It's called Team Sandhu Unbreakable. Team
Sandhu Unbreakable. Sounds good. We're chatting with Rupinder Sandhu, who is a volunteer with the Canadian, with the Lupus Ontario organization. She's suffered for 24 years with lupus, but has been resilient and successful. Has gotten through it, and she's now a principal in an elementary school in Meadowvale in Mississauga. We're going to take a break and come back more with Rupinder in just a minute. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. We're chatting tonight with Rupinder Sandhu, who is a volunteer with Lupus Ontario. She has suffered with lupus for 24 years. She was a teacher and then a vice principal, and now she's a principal in a elementary school in Meadowvale in Mississauga. She wanted to bring people's awareness of lupus because May is Lupus Awareness Month. She's organized and participates in a walk for lupus in August 21st, and she's here to tell us a little bit about her journey. So Rupinder, thanks again for joining us and sharing your journey with us. How has the pandemic impacted you and other people with lupus?
Well, I mean, living through the pandemic has been difficult for everyone. I guess for people with lupus and other autoimmune diseases, it's particularly concerning because if you do get lupus, you may be at a higher risk for getting lupus because you're on immunosuppressive drugs. So because I'm on these drugs, any infection is easier for me to get. So that's been a concern for many people with lupus, is trying to stay safe. I know that some people, who have that and their disease is active, they feel very concerned about going outside or going into anywhere where there's large groups. So that's been one concern.
Now you're a principal of a school, and schools, have gone back and forth between being open and being virtual. How have you dealt with that, given your concern about having this autoimmune disease?
Yeah, I've been very cautious, and I've been very careful to follow all of the health measures that are in place. So, making sure that my hands are kept clean, my mask is on, my shield is on. So particularly when I'm out and about in the school, if I have to visit a class for any reason, we have very strict measures in place. So we're doing these cohorts where the class is only interacting with that one class, right? So they're even outside for recess, they're only in their class.
But I've had emergency experts on my show that tell me that that's good, but the problem is things like French teachers and music teachers and principals that go from class to class break those sort of cohorts down, and can be either the super spreaders or the people that catch it and then transmit it to another. So how do you deal with that?
Well, we've been trying our best. That does happen for sure. We do have teachers who have to go to multiple classrooms, and myself, if I have to go to multiple classrooms, we keep track of that. We have records of which classes you've been in to make sure that if there is an issue that we can do the contact tracing properly. We try to keep our, PPE on, keep our hands clean. That's all we can do. So we're operating within the structure that's been set up for us.
How else has the pandemic impacted people with lupus? Have you, not been able to go to hospital as often? Have you been, have you heard stories about people with lupus catching the virus, and how are they dealt with, et cetera?
Yeah, so all of our clinic appointments have gone to either virtual or telephone appointments.
How do you get your blood tests?
Well, that's the thing. I think there's a lot of people who probably aren't going for their regular blood tests, which is a danger as well, because you don't
I can imagine.
Yeah. So, for example, I haven't gone as regularly as I'm supposed to, but I did go recently, and we just have to go to our local labs. So normally I get my blood drawn at the lupus clinic, but now I've just been going to my local lab here. And you don't want to go in there, but I did go because I have an upcoming appointment with my doctor, and I wanted to make sure I have my blood work, because it's critical to see any changes in your blood that the doctors rely on looking at to be able to judge if there's any disease activity.
Right. And you said that when former President Trump was touting the benefits of hydroxychloroquine for COVID-19, that some people that take it weren't able to get it. What do they do if the drug's not available? Is there an alternative drug, or they went without it? Did they get a flare up, or tell me what happened?
I think people have had to go without it, and they've been searching around at pharmacies. Their pharmacist has been calling other pharmacies trying to get it. It's been really difficult for those people who weren't able to get it. I was very lucky. My pharmacist, as soon as she heard it in the news, I think I'm the only one in her pharmacy on that drug. So she got my year's worth and put it aside for me.
Really? Your own pharmacist anticipated the potential problem and got a year's worth of supply?
As soon as it was in the news, she knew that, she just thought, I better do this. And she put it aside. And I was thinking about it, wondering what was going to happen. So I called her saying, do you think I'm going to have a problem? And she said, oh, don't worry, Rupinder, I put it aside for you. So she's amazing.
That's wonderful. That's the type of service you want to get from a pharmacist. My gosh, that's fantastic.
Yes.
That's a good news story. I'm glad you shared that with us.
Yeah.
What about vaccines? Do people with lupus, can they take vaccines? Do they want to take vaccines? Are there any risks?
I think most people want to take it. I think in every population, there's some people who are nervous about taking the vaccine. I have received my first dose, and many of the people that I work with at Lupus Ontario have received their first dose. The issue with the vaccine is with people who are on immunosuppressive drugs, they may not build the antibodies in the same way as the regular population. So in my body, the vaccine, I guess the way you could describe it is, I might be fighting the vaccine because I'm on those immunosuppressive drugs, right? Because I won't be able to build the same amount of antibody, is how it's been described to me. So the recommendation is from researchers is to give the second dose on time, like they're doing for cancer patients and transplant patients. But of course, that's not what's happening. That's not the protocol that the government has out right now. So we're waiting for our second dose the same way as everybody else. However, it would be more beneficial if we could get the second dose on time to have a better outcome of having enough antibodies produced.
Does it make any sense to, take a third dose to build up those antibodies
I don't know. I've heard that. I've read that a couple of times, that could be a possible solution if somebody isn't building up the antibodies. So that'll be interesting to hear more about. I don't know.
You know, it's interesting. Someone like yourself and other people with lupus are more susceptible to getting the virus. And if they get it, then it having a far more negative impact on you because of your suppressed immune system. How do you feel about people in your community that don't want to take the vaccine and are really potentially, harmful to you?
Well, I guess, the government is saying that the messaging is that, you should always talk to your doctor about it before you go for the vaccine, and really judge the pros and cons, the risk versus benefit idea, right? So is there higher risk at taking the vaccine, or is the higher risk at getting COVID, right? So that's what you have to discuss with your doctor. And anyone like myself who goes for the vaccine they will ask you, have you discussed with your doctor? So there is a risk to some people if their disease is highly active.
No, I understand completely. I'm talking to you about how you feel about other people in your community, just like generally in your area, that are anti-vaxxers.
I feel very worried about that. I think that there is a group of people who are resisting the vaccine, but as you know, with vaccines, they only work if the majority of people get them, right?
And more than the majority, probably 70, 80%. You can't be just 51.
Yes, that's what I mean. Yeah. So I feel very upset about that, actually. The reason that we've been able to, as a human race, survive all these different diseases is because of vaccination. And I think it's people who just don't maybe understand. Some people are saying that it's just so new and it hasn't been tested enough, but it has been widely tested. And
it's been in millions of people already. So that's the best test.
Yes, true. Yeah, no, it's very upsetting to hear about that, for sure. We need as many people vaccinated as possible.
So tell me about how lupus has impacted your life. Does it impact your ability to get pregnant, for an example?
People with lupus definitely have successful pregnancies. It does add risk. For me, I have not had my own children, but I also was, older when I started trying to have children. So I'm not sure if it was my lupus or my age, but many people with lupus have successful pregnancies, but they are usually watched very carefully and have very regular appointments because they're considered, a risky pregnancy.
Did you look into fertility clinics and other ways of getting pregnant? And does having lupus impact those methodologies?
I did go down a variety of different paths, and I had close care from a specialist who is a rheumatologist, but also a specialist in pregnancy care. So I did investigate a lot of different pathways.
What about what you eat? Does it change at all what you eat?
You should keep a healthy diet as a lupus patient. For me, when I have had blood clots in the past, some very significant ones. And so I'm on blood thinners. And while I was on a blood thinner called Coumadin, with that, I had to watch what I ate because your iron levels had to stay kind of stable. So say you have spinach, then you have to have spinach every day. Any of the green leafy, either you have it every day or you don't. Otherwise, your levels go up and down. And at that time, I had to go for regular, every 2 weeks, a test to check how thick or thin my blood was. But since it's been a few years now, I've come off of that medication. I'm on something different, a newer medication. as a blood thinner, and I don't have to worry about tests, and I don't have to worry about what I eat.
Does either lupus or the medication you take for lupus impact weight gain or weight loss?
Yeah, if you're when I was in a flare, I lost a lot of weight, and people do go either lose weight, sometimes gain weight. While I was taking prednisone, which is a very strong drug that really quickly controls the lupus and inflammation, I gained weight and I had a lot of swelling. Like with prednisone, you often get like a chubby kind of face and a barrel, like your torso it takes like a barrel shape. So I gained weight at that time. So yeah, you can gain, you can lose. Lupus patients suffer from a variety of different symptoms. So
what's been the key to your resilience, surviving with it, doing well with it, becoming a principal with it?
I guess I think I'm a pretty determined person, and I try not to have, like, emotionally, I try to, keep a positive outlook and look at the big picture. I think that in my life, I've had a lot of different things happen that I've kind of just taken the mindset that this is the life I've been given, and I have to do the best I can with the circumstances that I have. So of course there were low times where you feel very depressed. Why did this happen to me? But if you stay in that mindset, then it can really become dark, right? So I just feel like I've tried to keep like I said, tried to keep a positive mindset and tried to not take too much of an emotional perspective rather than just like logical. And there's going to be people in the world who have disease and illness, and I'm one of them, but that doesn't dictate my life. Like, I still have to try to do the things that I want in my life. And I feel like I've been lucky to have the care that I have, that I can do them, because there have been times in my life where I wasn't stable and I was not able to do the things I'm doing.
We're chatting with Rupinder Sandhu, who is a volunteer with Lupus Ontario. She's a principal in an elementary school here in Meadowvale, Mississauga, and she wants to educate people during Lupus Awareness Month, May. We're going to take a break for some last messages and come back with some concluding comments in just a minute with Rupinder. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. So May is Lupus Awareness Month, and Rupinder Sandhu has joined us. She is a principal in the elementary school system in Peel and a school in Meadowvale in Mississauga. She suffered with lupus for 24 years. She found out she had lupus when she was in her 20s. She was a student, a bachelor student for teaching in Ottawa, and has lived with it successfully her whole life, with ups and downs, you've said. Rupinder, your sister wanted me to interview you because she thought that you were an inspiration for people because you had dealt with challenges so well. And it's interesting because your sister is a psychotherapist, and so she must know people that have got challenges, that deal with problems well or don't deal with problems well. In your email to me, you said that with the help of friends and family, and you also credit the hospital, and you also credit Lupus Ontario. Tell me, what are the keys to anybody suffering through a problem in dealing with that problem and how they get through it?
Well, I think that you can't get through it on your own, of course. Like you've said, I've relied on different people. I think you have to recognize your feelings and, acknowledge your feelings. It's okay to have times where you're not doing well. But it's also important to work past that. So whether it's through therapy, whether it's through talking to your friends, spending time with your family, I have really, you know, surrounded myself with my family and friends throughout the time. So, you know, it takes effort too. Like sometimes you think, oh, well, I haven't seen these particular friends in a while, but you have to make contact and try to, you know, allocate that time to those friendships. In terms of, you know, also I've tried to lead a normal life. Like I try to get out as much as possible. You know, when I'm tired, I come home and I sleep, and that's okay. Like I don't push myself. Like it's a balance. So you want to see friends, but I don't push myself to do more than I can, because that's when you know, the disease can start to get active. So I don't mind that I stay home a lot. That's what works for me, right? If I need to go to sleep early, I go to sleep early. I don't try to push it, but I do try to build those kinds of things into my life. Like I like to travel. My husband likes to travel, so we try to get out and see the world as much as possible, and that's been a huge part of my life.
Do you think it's fair? Do you recognize and agree with your sister's comment to me that you're an inspiration because of your resilience?
I guess I never really think of myself that way. I don't reflect on myself that way, but I guess so, because, you know, to overcome a chronic not overcome, but to live with a chronic illness and try to still participate in the world in a regular way is sometimes difficult. So I have had a few people say that to me, that, you know, they were inspired to do something even though they have a chronic illness, because of seeing what I was doing.
You know, all of us.
There's many people like me out there.
Well, all of us have gone through a challenging year with the pandemic, but when you think about all the mental health issues because of the pandemic, we haven't suffered nearly as much as you for 24 years. So you are an inspiration. What do you say to us, the rest of society that is complaining about the pandemic and how upset we are with dealing with our situation for the past year, given you're putting up with 24 years of lupus?
I would say take it one day at a time. Each day that we are here, we're blessed. Look at what you are grateful for. Look at all that you have. Like many people who are complaining are still living in, you know, a detached home where they can stay safe. They have food at their fingertips at all times, clean running water, you know, beautiful homes, places, green spaces to go. And, you know, when you have all of this and you see people around the world who are in cramped quarters, they have no possibility for keeping their distance. There's no possibility for just staying home. You know, we have so much in our life here that, you know, you have to be grateful. And if you see what you do have, you can have a more positive mindset, right? Like we have so much.
Be grateful. I think that's a great recommendation. Remind us how we register for the walk and participate in the walk, and what's the name of your team?
Yes, please. Yes. The walk, you can register for the walk at www.walkforlupusontario.org. And you can, if you're in Mississauga and want to walk, you can join the Mississauga Walk. When you get online, you'll see you can choose your walk location. You could also choose a walk team. If you want to join my team, it is Team Sandhu, Sandhu, Unbreakable. So if you look up my name, Rupinder Sandhu, or Team Sandhu, you can find us there. And also, if you just want to donate because you don't want to walk, you can do that as well. There's a donate button. And finally, if you are a company and would like to do a corporate sponsorship, that option is also available. So www.walkforlupusontario.org. And, you know, it's a great, great organization. Most of our funds go to the, it's a Jeff Carr Fellowship. So we support a fellow in one of, you know, a doctor training to be a lupus expert in one of the Lupus Ontario clinics. They have sponsored many doctors to learn more about lupus and become experts. So that's where much of the funding goes, and then also to help to make life better and better for lupus people who suffer from lupus. So
Rupinder Sandhu, thank you so much for joining us tonight and bringing up our awareness about lupus. And I'm going to sign up to walk. And what team am I going to join?
Team Sandhu.
I thought it was Team Sandhu Unbeatable.
Unbreakable, yes.
Unbreakable.
Team Sandhu Unbreakable.
Team Sandhu Unbreakable. Sounds good. And everyone else, give that some thought. Thank you to Rupinder Sandhu for joining us and telling us about lupus awareness and the Lupus Awareness Month. And Rupinder, you are an inspiration for your resilience to all of us. So thank you very much for your inspirational personal story. That's the Brian Crombie Radio Wire for tonight. I come to you every Monday through Friday at 7 o'clock on 960 AM, or I'm streamed online at www.saga960am.ca, or you can get all my podcasts and videocasts on briancrombie.com, on YouTube, Brian Crombie Radio Hour, on Audible, Spotify, Spreakeasy, and a whole bunch of other podcast sites. So please listen to me. Thanks so much. Good night, everybody.